I think the ambassador was able to articulate very well not only Congo's position, but also what this conflict means for the region and for Africa in particular as well.
It was definitely very insightful to hear about the tangible impact that this is having on the lives of the Congolese people themselves. And it also gave quite interesting points that we should think about when we're thinking of the role of international actors, like the role of France, the role of the EU, and the role of the US, and what role they can play in this conflict.
I hope that action will be taken quickly to bring supportive resources to those who've been displaced and bring an end to the war urgently.
All right, well, good evening. My name is Brian Chalmers, organizer of this event. First of all, I want to say how pleased I am to see such a large audience for this event, a conference perhaps taking place 30 years too late, concerning what is often referred to as the situation, the conflict, or the instability in the east of the Democratic Republic of Congo. The DRC is at war. And it is a war now having taken well over 5 million lives in the space of 3 decades. Whilst there is no doubt in my mind that the guilty, as well as the regime in Kigali and its accomplices, will be held accountable for this unabated bloodshed and these crimes against the Congolese people, I urge us to consider these events over the past few weeks as a cry of desperation in the face of an international environment ever more unfavorable to its strategies of manipulation. And I'll retake the words of a very famous Congolese pastor. Ce qui est à Congo, va comme agité, il va que na muito e singité, which is to say that if you see in the morning they have become agitated, know that at night the maneuvers have failed. So, with that said, we are incredibly lucky to be in the presence of His Excellency, Ambassador Mbokwe of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the United Kingdom. Prior to his appointment, he figured as a member of the presidential panel for the mandate of President Tshisekedi at the head of the African Union. Ambassador Mbokwe served for 3 decades in the United Nations, attaining the rank of Assistant Secretary General, as well as a Joint Special Representative to the Secretary General during the electoral crisis in Côte d'Ivoire. Notably, he worked as the coordinator of the UN systems and humanitarian efforts in Mozambique and Côte d'Ivoire as well. Whilst working with UNICEF, he was not only regional joint director for Central and West Africa, but also became the first African to occupy the post of Secretary Director of the Council of Administration. Academically, Ambassador Mbokwe's CV is equally illustrious, holding a PhD from UCLA, United States, 3 master's degrees in development economics, anthropology, and public health, respectively. He is the author of several books and scientific articles. His Excellency became professor in 1985 in his native city of Lubumbashi, and has since taught in the United States, Brazil, Mozambique, Guinea, Senegal, among other countries. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Ambassador Mbokwe to the University of Oxford.
Let me begin by thanking the organizers of this event for having me here. Let me also thank you for your participation, for taking the time to have this exchange. I will mainly focus on 4 points, 4 key issues. The first point, the humanitarian crisis. We forget that wars destroys life. Wars destroy livelihoods. But let me tell you something. All Congolese are now determined. They are saying enough is enough. This cannot continue forever, because this is not the Congo we want to leave to our children.
It's interesting in the role of the European Union and to see the potential influence we could possibly have to help actually and negotiate and end this conflict.
I think it's very important conversation to have, and I'm glad that the African Society here was able to organize it.
I think we don't talk as much about this subject, and we really need to focus more on what's happening right now in Congo, what's happening right now in Goma.
A very, very important opportunity and occasion for the wider audience here at the University of Oxford to get the Congolese perspective on what is going on. Because for years, Rwanda has been shaping its story, but which was not absolutely story, an absolute story.
Ryan, you're the main organizer, of Congo's conference at Oxford University here. For the first time, as yourself, during your introduction, as you mentioned, it was the first time after 3 decades, I think, Congo to be invited at that important stage at Oxford University. Why do you think that at that particular context of time, Congo issues was necessary to be debated here at Oxford University?
Yeah, so as you know, this is a war that's been going on for 30 years. It's the deadliest war that the world has known in a long time. But it's been largely swept under the rug, even in academic context. So most of the discussion that we've had about the war in the East of the Congo has been purely academic, rather detached from the conference and, from the context. And I don't think we should obscure the fact that there's been a heavy Rwandan influence within UK and US and French universities over the past 30 years in the interest of the state. And to that effect, I would say that the DRC's diplomatic efforts have been lacking in that domain for lack of means, lack of resources, lack of time, lack of institutional support within universities. And so with the resurgence of the war in early February, the fall of Goma, the fall of Bukavu, I felt that it was absolutely necessary to give the voice to the Congolese state and moreover to the Congolese people, as they have not been heard over these past 3 decades. And I think that as the rather large turnout that we saw demonstrated, for a university that has very few links to the Congo, actually, this is a subject that just hasn't been touched. And it was really, I think, struck a chord for most of the students. So that would be my overview of the motivation.
Yeah, it was about the good turnout, more than 140 people. Absolutely. And we've seen the audience was very enthusiastic to learn about. During the Q&A, we've seen the ambassador Ngonkwe was explaining the situation at that particular time, and people were mostly concerned about humanitarian crisis situation in Congo. What's your perspective overall with regard to Oxford University relationship with Congolese itself, Congolese as an individual diaspora, or Congo as a state?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first thing we can mention with respect to the turnout and the kind of passion that was demonstrated by the students comes from what I think was a wonderful decision by the embassy to field all questions. There was no limits on who could ask questions or what could be asked or even how many questions in what context. And His Excellency was kind enough to respond to them all and to give honest, complete answers, which I think is important in this kind of diplomatic effort. As far as the relations between the Congo and Oxford, if you want to say UK higher education, goes, I mean, I think it's the same relation that the UK has with most of our sphere, which is the Francophone sphere of Africa, which is a general disconnect. I did I was studied in France up to here. We have that same kind of disconnect with Anglophone Africa, which is we don't learn much about Kenya or Tanzania or Zimbabwe, and to the same effect, I just don't think that there's much. I mean, I just don't think most people in Anglophone universities could find the Congo on a map. You know what I mean? It's just a general disconnect. So we try to bridge that gap a little bit.
All right. Thank you, Ryan, for your time.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.